Hi guys, welcome to Heart to Heart Ministries. Bernadette Jones here, and today I actually want to start a new teaching series, I guess you could call it, entitled Truth or Lies, where we will be discussing these popular phrases that we hear, whether in church or outside of church, but typically they're about God and Christianity. So we're going to be addressing those and actually seeing what the Word has to say on it. And the first one I want to talk about, we hear it all the time, is we're all God's children. So, truth or lie? Do you think that's true, we're all God's children, or that it's a lie, that we are not all God's children? Take a second, think about it before I tell you what it is. Well, if you said lie, you would be correct. And now you're like, well, how can you say that? Because that's what the Word says. And we're actually going to go to Scripture to actually back that up. So again, I'm not giving you my opinion on whether these are truths or whether they're lies. I'm actually going to give you Scripture and what the Word says on them. So the first Scripture I want to jump to is going to be John 14:6. And it says, Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And that's the New King James Version. I want to give you the Amplified. And it says, Jesus said to him, I am the only way to God and the real truth and the real life. No one comes to the Father but through me. So, we hear a lot in times of tragedy. When I say we, I say Christians is what I mean, is we'll comfort people by saying we're all God's children and, all this other stuff, but that's just not true. We're not all God's children. I know we like to say it. I know it's popular, but we're not telling people the truth, because if you're telling a sinner that we're all God's children, well, what's the incentive for them to get saved? When you become a Christian, you become a child of God. When you give your life to Christ, when you have that personal relationship with Jesus Christ, that's when you become a child of God. You're not a child of God just because you're here. You are God's creation. Yes, he created you. He knows everything about you. But to have that personal relationship with him, then that's when you become a child of God. You're not just automatically a child of God because you're here. So we as the church need to stop saying that, because if we're not spreading the truth, which is what the Word says, then we're spreading a lie. And Satan is the father of lies. So we're helping people be deceived into thinking that they're okay because we're all God's children. And that's absolutely not true. So yes, he does rule over, all of us. He's the creator of everything. The Word says he reigns on the just and the unjust. So also, if you are a believer, you are considered just. Which just, righteous, just means you're in right standing with God. So you're considered just. The just shall live by faith. So which means if you're not a believer, you are considered unjust. So, but to know that no, we are not all God's children. I want to give you another scripture for that. And it's 1 John 3:10. It says, in this, the children of God and the children of the devil are manifest. Whoever does not practice righteousness is not of God, nor is he who does not love his brother. So the Word says in 1 John 3:10, there are children of God and children of the devil. Why are we not talking about that? Why are we not teaching that? Why are we not telling people the truth that if you do not have a relationship with God, you are not a child of God. You are actually a child of the devil. Now, you can become a child of God through a relationship with Jesus Christ. You can absolutely do that. But also, don't be deceived into thinking that just because you go to church, that you're good. That just because you grew up in church, that you're saved. If you do not have that personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And it also says, whoever does not practice righteousness is not of God. Well, what is righteousness? Righteousness, God's ways. His ways are right. And so that would be his word. And so I also want to read this in the Amplified. So 1 John 3:10 in the Amplified. And it states, by this, the children of God and the children of the devil are clearly identified. There's a clear identification between the children of God and the children of the devil. anyone who does not practice righteousness, who does not seek God's will in thought, action, and purpose is not of God. So, yeah, that's not it. It keeps going. Nor is the one who does not unselfishly love his believing brother. So scripture clearly states there are children of God, children of the devil, and they are clearly identified. So if you're living like the devil, and what I mean by that, if you are not following the word, if you are living in rebellion to the word, like you know what the word says and you're living completely opposite, then you're living in rebellion. You're not living in righteousness and walking after righteousness the way that we're supposed to as believers. It's like, why even call yourself a believer? And Jesus even says, why call me Lord, Lord, and not do the things that I say? And what is he talking about when he says the things that he said? The things that he says in his word. He gives us clear instructions on how we as believers are supposed to live and supposed to walk out this life. So we can't, as believers, we need to stop telling the world, you know what, we're all God's children. When tragedy happens, we need to stop saying we're all God's children. We need to stop saying that everybody's going to heaven, because that's essentially what we do. Someone dies and you know they weren't living right. Like, you know it. And typically in a moment, that person doesn't have time to get right. Now, I understand if it's a process and they were dying, that they do have time. But in the moment, when people die like that and we go, oh my God, you know, they're in heaven. But did their lifestyle reflect that? Did their lifestyle reflect that relationship with Jesus? And I know many people will be like, well, you can't say and you don't know and da da da. But the word even lines out of who's going and who's not, because the word says, and Jesus, this is Jesus talking. Jesus says, you're either going to hear, well done, thy good and faithful servant, which means you lived your life for him. You served him. Or depart from me, I never knew you. So it's one of those two. Either, and I know you can be like, well, how can he say that he never knew me? Were you living rebelliously? And I did a teaching on that a few weeks ago. But it addresses that, were you living a rebellious lifestyle? Because that's not how he created you to be. Especially if you're a believer, he created you in his image and his likeness. Which, remember, Jesus was obedient until death. He was obedient until death, to dying on the cross. So do we have that same obedience? Do we have that same, when it comes to the call of God on our lives, do we have that same, I'm willing to die for this. Like, I'm willing to die for the cause of Christ. Do we live that same way? So again, to the point, we're not all God's children. If you do not have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, then you are not a child of God. But you can be, if you want to. But it is a choice. So we as the church and we as believers need to stop telling people we're all God's children. Because again, like I said, if you're telling me I'm a child of God, then why do I need to get saved? Why? There's no point. Why would I need to get saved? If you're basically telling me I'm good, because that's essentially what we're saying. We're telling people we're all God's children, which means, you know, in their mind, they're like, well, I'm good. But then we want to tell them about Jesus and a relationship with him. And I'd be like, why? Like, you just told me we're all God's children. So what do I need to get saved? Why do I need to have that personal relationship with him? And yes, we do, you know, the benefits of heaven and hell. Yes, hell is real. Hell is real. But we've got to stop telling everybody that we're all God's children, because we're telling a lie. We're promoting a lie. So we're promoting a lie. We know Satan is the father of lies. So we are promoting that lie when we keep saying that. And no, scripture clearly states either children of God or children of the devil. And they are clearly identified. So I actually want to read 1 John 3 and 10 again before we finish up. And I'm going to read it again in the Amplified. And it says, by this, the children of God and the children of the devil are clearly identified. Anyone who does not practice righteousness, who does not seek God's will in thought, action, and purpose, is not of God, nor is the one who does not unselfishly love his believing brother. So also, if you're not walking in love, yeah. Because even 1 John 4, the 1 John 4 in the whole chapter talks about God is love. And if you, do not love, you do not know God, for God is love. So that's another thing. Are you walking in love? And do you have that personal relationship with Jesus? Those are, scripture says, those are the two things. So that is today's truth or lie. We are not all God's children, so we need to stop saying that. But thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Heart to Heart, and we will see you next time.